This is your coffee break. Hey friends, I am back again this week, and I have with me author and I want to say business owner of Writer's Edit. Her name is Helen Scheuerer, and I really hope I'm saying your name right. Welcome to the show, Helen. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to just jump right into things. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a writer and a published author?
I sure can. So I wanted to be a writer since I was about 7 years old. I remember the first story I ever wrote, and I wrote that when I was about seven. And I remember the first story that was ever published. It was just in the school newspaper. But I really remember having that moment of realization when my words were kind of put into print. And I think that was kind of when I became aware just how much I wanted to be a published author. And then obviously after school and stuff, I did a creative writing degree. So there I was pretty much surrounded by other really creative people and writers. And we got into doing things like workshopping each other's writing and learning how to take criticism and that kind of stuff. And that was a really incredibly valuable experience, as you can imagine, for this industry. And then around that time, I wrote a bunch of really terrible manuscripts. And, just slowly and slowly they became less terrible, I hope. Yeah, and I guess a big part of the journey has been that I have this compulsion to be working on something book related, whether it's the writing itself or editing or book production, anything like that really. If I'm not working on something, I just feel really agitated or restless. So I guess that's just a major part of the journey, I guess.
It's so interesting that you say that. I am exactly the same way. And there's some evenings where I'm just sitting around and your words restless and agitated are so perfect for that condition where you're like, oh my gosh, I just feel icky. I feel rotten inside. And you realize you haven't written or you haven't edited or you haven't done anything book related that day.
Absolutely.
Do you have any idea where that compulsion comes from?
No idea. And it's so frustrating because, and I talk to my writer friends a lot about this kind of stuff, is that also alongside of that comes guilt. So if I'm not working on something and I'm not kind of paying attention to that compulsion, I feel guilty. I don't remember the last time I sat through an entire TV show without doing something on the side because I felt like I was bludging.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes.
yeah, it's such a hard thing to kind of, come home on the evenings to kind of relax and put all that stuff aside just to chill out. I find that really difficult.
I do too. I appreciate you saying that so much because there's really two sides to this coin. And that is, number one, finding time to write and to work on stuff because, we're busy and it feels like a luxury sometimes to be able to write. But on the other hand, when we do have that relaxation time, not being able to use it to be healthy and to practice some self-care. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I don't know if you're doing anything to kind of work on that or if you have any advice.
I recently just got back into exercising. So for a really long time, I used to be really fit and really active. And then around the time I started Writer's Edit, when I started Writer's Edit, I was working a full-time job as well. So I'd go to work from 9 till 6 or something like that, come home, do dinner, and then sit down and do Writer's Edit stuff or work on one of my books. So around that time, I really wasn't doing much exercise, and you kind of forget how much exercise helps you mentally. It just kind of hits refresh on everything. And so recently I took up just some dance classes, nothing serious or anything. Mainly I spend half the time laughing at myself. But you kind of, once you start doing it again, you realize, wow, this is really good for me, because you leave and you feel happy and you feel rejuvenated, and it just, then the next day you're just more aware of yourself, and I don't know, I seem to be able to get back into working the next day a lot easier, because I was going through times where I would work until, 11 o'clock at night and then, just basically shut the laptop down and then pass out. And so the whole self-care thing, I don't think it's really spoken about enough in the writing industry in particular. We burn out a lot. We're constantly struggling with self-doubt and trying to get published, and it's a lot of there's a lot of anxiety there that you're dealing with. And I think more than anything, for me anyway, getting back into just a little bit of exercise has helped perk me up again, I think.
I appreciate that so much. And you're right, we don't talk about it enough. And it's just been on my mind lately a little bit because my own lifestyle is changing. I recently left my job and am writing full time, and I'm just struggling to find balance. So thank you for saying that. That also, oh gosh, well, yeah. Sorry, I keep interrupting you too. I'm very rude.
Oh, no, I'm going to do that to you.
Okay,
too,
good.
So
Please do. Talk right over me. So I want to call on something that you said a little bit. You were working a full-time job while you were starting Writer's Edit. How did that happen? I mean, it sounded like you got burned out when you were working on your novel. I mean, was there a routine? How did you finally settle all this out?
Do you mean like after I stopped working full-time or?
You know what? Maybe I want to hear a little bit about that transition if you don't mind sharing it.
Yeah, sure. So I think, this feels like a long time ago now, but I was working, and the other problem is that my full-time job was a writing job as well. I was a copywriter from basically when I left uni, for about 3 years or so, and that was full-time. And so I was doing my writing in my spare time outside of doing my writing as a job. I feel like that's quite a tricky thing to balance as well, just because you just feel like you're constantly churning out words and it's hard to figure out which words matter and which don't really.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was after about 3 years or so, I'm not sure if I had started Writer's Edit, but I was definitely writing books and things, and I kind of just decided, my copywriting job was quite soul crushing. Like, it was basically churning out product descriptions for an e-com site. And yeah, I probably didn't go about it in the wisest way. Basically, what I should have done was drop down my days or drop down hours, but instead I was just like, I'm going to pack this whole thing in, and I quit. I quit and I went to England. So that was probably not the wisest thing, but it was such a relief. And basically, after I came back from the UK, I started Writer's Ed after I got back from the UK. So I didn't have a full-time job, but then it was kind of the struggle of trying to balance freelance work and finding freelance work with starting a new business and putting my book out there to publishers and trying to get a publishing contract. So I definitely had a routine. I'm all about the routine. If I'm writing a book, particularly if I'm writing fantasy, I try to do it every day, just because I find it's really important to immerse yourself in that world as much as you can. And I'm just someone who thrives on routine. So I'm all about the to-do lists. I start work every day at the same time. I'm very meticulous about that sort of thing, because I find if I don't stick to that routine, then it's like a slippery slope downhill, and I become very unproductive. And I feel then we go into that whole feeling icky about not working on the stuff that you're really passionate about.
And you talked a little bit about the routine being necessary for your fantasy. And I know that you are publishing a book, YA fiction. I also know that you have a history in literary fiction. Can you tell us a little bit about why you changed from one to the other, and if the routines that you used to write then were any different?
Yeah, of course. Basically, I think when I did my creative writing degree, like, it was a wonderful degree, and it exposed me to so many different types of literature and so many amazing people. But I think it was very much skewed towards literary fiction. Literary fiction was the serious writing. If you weren't writing serious literary fiction, you weren't like a proper writer. I mean, they never actually said that to us, but that was definitely the kind of attitude that was there. So it kind of started to shape me as this writer who wanted to write this serious fiction, that was taken really seriously. and it kind of left all the other genres a bit by the wayside. And so I was writing short stories, and my first book, which was a literary fiction novel about a child soldier in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So it's very,
Oh my
very different
gosh.
to fantasy. So I was writing that, and that was actually signed with a publisher, and I just kind of started to get this feeling like it wasn't right for me. I wasn't writing the right book for me, and basically in the end it was a blessing in disguise that that publisher ended up reverting the rights back to me, and so that book never actually hit the shelves. But it was while I was going through some really like heavy edits of this book that I did NaNoWriMo, so National Novel Writing Month.
Yes.
And I wrote my first draft for my fantasy book in that, and it was just like something clicked for me. Like I I don't know, it was just all the pieces fell into place, and I was like, oh my God, this is what writing a book feels like. This is what I want to be doing. How have I not been doing this whole time? And it was just an amazing, like one of those light bulb moments where I realized, oh, I've been writing the wrong book for 4 years.
I know that feeling so well. I also went through a writing program in college, and it was the same thing. They focused very heavily on literary fiction and kind of made you feel like genre fiction was not legitimate.
Exactly.
And then when you break away and find what you love to write, I'm so glad you found that.
Me too. Can you imagine? I would have spent the next like 10 years writing the wrong genre.
Oh my gosh. So going like looking back, what do you feel about those 4 years that you spent writing literary fiction? Do you feel they were wasted? I mean, how do you feel about that?
I don't think it could ever be wasted spending time perfecting your craft. I mean, that's what it was. Just learning how to craft a story, learning how to plot a novel, things like that. I mean, it's not time wasted at all, because even though it's a different genre, it's absolutely applied to writing this next book and writing the book after that. Like, it's very, very valuable lessons learned. So yeah, I mean, would I have loved to have had this lesson a little earlier? Sure, but I don't think it's time wasted at all. And I mean, I think the books that I'm writing now are far more stronger for it.
I have to like break in and say how much I appreciate you today. For whatever reason, I feel like you're speaking directly to me, and maybe it's because I'm asking you questions and you're answering them. But I also feel like you are just full of so much wisdom, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. And I know that so many people listening to this are just going to be nodding while they're listening to you talk, because I feel like we're in such a similar place. Kind of, and no pressure or anything, but do you have any advice that you would give to writers who are hoping one day to publish?
Yeah, I actually get asked this quite a lot, and I find I give different pieces of advice all over the place. But one I've actually been thinking a lot about lately, for writers who are hoping to get published. And I mean, that's also what Writer's Edit is a lot about. So there's plenty of advice on there if anybody wants to go and check that out. But yeah, I guess the main thing, that I'd say today is basically get as much experience in getting critiqued as you can, because, it doesn't really matter what publishing path you're going down, whether you're going indie or traditional. You are going to have to deal with beta readers and editors and, people just generally giving you their opinion on your writing. And you need to be able to take constructive feedback on board. And as an author, you should really revel in that and want to make your work as best as it possibly can be.
Do you have any advice for developing maybe a thick skin? That criticism, you're right, it's so crucial, but it also can kind of hurt sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess being part of like workshop groups or even like sharing your work online and things can help. But also the one thing I always try to keep in mind is just that you can never make everybody happy. Mm-hmm. Like, some people have different pet peeves. Some people will read your work and critique it even though they don't even like the genre that you're writing in. So obviously you have to listen to the feedback that you're being given, but you don't always have to agree with it, and you do have to remember that you just can't always make everybody happy, and that's something I have to remind myself of every now and then.
Me too. Amen to that. Oh my gosh. So kind of going back a little bit, you talked about beta readers, you talked a little bit about critiques. Can you run us through the steps that it takes to, to get your book published, from writing it all the way through all of that extra stuff at the end?
I could talk about this all day.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the whole writing process. And I mean, I guess the first thing to say is that everybody is going to approach the writing and submitting and publishing processes so differently. We're all writing different books. We're all in different countries. We're all aiming for different goals. So, I mean, that's the first thing to really kind of remember. But in terms of, like, maybe I'll skip the writing stage, because that's going to just be a huge thing. But I guess I learned a lot about, book production and publishing, through my Masters of Publishing. So I did a second degree that was focused on publishing, and that was a really interesting way to look at kind of the business side of things and the marketing in like a theoretical context. But I guess I didn't really kind of understand everything and, grow as passionate as I am about the whole industry as I did when I started. So I started Writer's Edit, and basically the goal of Writer's Edit was to become a small press. That was pretty much the dream for me. And since then, we've published 3 creative writing anthologies. And through doing that, I learned so much about just all the processes and like the different team members and stuff it takes to create that one product. And it is a product. It's art, but it's also a product. And I think some of us forget that. But yeah, I mean, there's the whole editing stage, which is like 4 or 5 different stages in itself, the structural editing, the copy editing, the proofreading, all that kind of thing. And then, you've got to decide on the trim size and what paper you're using and the interior formatting. There's so many different elements to putting together a book. And, I would say to authors like who are interested in being published that maybe do some reading on this kind of stuff, because this is what your book is going to go through. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's indie or traditional. Your book will go through all these different stages, and it's really rewarding to understand the different processes throughout the publishing process itself. Yeah, I've gone on a ramble then, and I've totally forgotten what your question was.
No, well, you've answered my question perfectly. It was kind of, can you just kind of walk us through that process, which you absolutely did. Do you have, I know that this can seem like such a muddy, murky, confusing, overwhelming process. Do you have any resource suggestions for writers about where they can start learning about all this?
Well, I'm going to be biased and say Writer's Edit, of
Yay.
course. But, I mean, who else is good is Jenny Bravo, who I know you interviewed. She does a lot on indie publishing, and she's very open and honest about all her experiences. So if you're looking to look into indie publishing, I'd look at Writer's Edit and also Jenny Bravo's website, because she's very insightful and very open about where she's at with everything. It depends. It depends on, if the point is to decide whether or not you want to go down the indie route or you want to go down the traditional route. Yeah, I guess you just have to kind of take a look at some of your favorite authors and see what they're doing. Also look at indie authors who are doing really well, like people like Hugh Howey and Mark Dawson. They're making more money than any traditionally published author, so they're doing something right, and I guess you also need to question what you want out of being published. So for some people, it's being associated with one of the big 5, and for other people, it's so they have print copies to give to their friends and family. So you really kind of need to understand what you want from being published before you decide which path is right for you.
I love that. I've never actually heard or thought about that before. I would love to talk about your upcoming book. Can you tell us a little bit about it slash a lot about it?
I can tell you a little bit about it. I don't want to. I'm always really cautious that I'm going to like spoil people like of my own book. So as you can tell, I kind of go on these like rambling rants. So
I love your
yeah.
rambling rants. They're great.
Oh, good. Yeah, so my upcoming novel is called Heart of Mist, and it will be out 31st of August this year. And it is a YA fantasy book. And yeah, it basically follows the story of this 19-year-old girl, Bleak. She has magical powers in a realm where magic is forbidden. So obviously, if she uses those powers, it's not good news for her. And yeah, she basically gets summoned to the capital for the illegal use of magic, and kind of chaos ensues after that.
That sounds awesome and delightful. I also see that it looks like it's going to be the first book in a series.
Yes, it's going to be the first book in a trilogy, which I'm really excited about because I've never written a series before. So I'm very excited that I've spent the last year and a half or so, writing, rewriting, editing, and doing all this stuff with these characters in this world. And the really awesome thing for me anyway, hopefully for the readers too, but for me is that, it doesn't end here. I'm going to be with these characters for the next 3 years.
That is awesome. And I hope that you enjoy their company. And I'm sure that you do.
I hope so. I do at the moment. Ask me again in 2 years.
Was this the novel then that you started the first draft of during NaNoWriMo?
Yes, it was. So, oh God, I can't remember what year it was. It wasn't last year. It was the year before, I think. Me and some of the editors from Writer's Edit, we were getting quite caught up in Writer's Edit and not focusing enough on our own writing. So we kind of said, okay, for November, for NaNoWriMo, we'll write a book each, which is obviously easier said than done.
Yes.
But yeah, so I wrote the first draft, and I think it was pretty much all of the first draft in NaNoWriMo. I definitely hit the 50K mark, but obviously it's fantasy. It's a little bit longer than 50,000 words, maybe a lot longer.
Maybe a lot.
Yeah, but no. So yeah, I wrote the first draft in November of that year, and it was an awesome experience. I'm lucky enough that in my day-to-day life I'm always surrounded by writers and a really supportive reading and writing community. But NaNoWriMo is just like that times 1,000. So being able to update your progress and like checking in with the girls and saying, oh, how much did you write today, or what are you struggling with today? And it just made it like we're all in it together, and it was a really I don't know, it was just such an awesome community to be a part of, and it was really beneficial for the book, I think.
I would agree with that. I always do my best writing in community as well. I have to ask one more question, and that is, what was your favorite part in writing Heart of Mist?
Oh, my favorite part, I think writing that first draft, it was just, and I mean that might change as I write the next two books. But I think because for me, it was also like in context. I was editing and doing some really hard, heart-wrenching edits of that literary fiction novel that I mentioned. So I wasn't in the happiest place, creatively. And then doing NaNoWriMo and writing that first draft, it was just like this massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. It was so exciting to be in a world that, I had complete and utter control over. I was, allowed to be as creative and crazy as I wanted to be. And it really offered that sense of escape. And yeah, that just, I think, yeah, I mean, I've loved the whole journey of it. And also working with my beta readers has been a really rewarding experience. But I mean, for this particular book, writing that first draft was just so much fun. And I think I'd forgotten that writing is supposed to be fun. So it was really, that was probably my most favorite part of this book anyway.
What a wonderful thing to remember, that writing is supposed to be fun. I'm so glad you got to reconnect with that. My gosh.
Me too.
Well, Helen, this has been so delightful. Can you let us know where can we find you online?
So here's where my last name is going to be a bit tricky for people. But basically, I am on all the major social media platforms. So you can find me on Twitter at Helen Scheuerer. And that's you. If you could just put a link, maybe that would be easier.
I will put a link to it, yes, and people can click on it.
Yeah, so that's for Twitter and Instagram. I'm just Helen Scheuerer, and then for Facebook, I'm Helen Scheuerer Author. And I also have an author platform, which is HelenScheuerer.com. And if you visit that, you can actually get a free prequel story to Heart of Mist if you sign up to my mailing list. And there's going to be lots of kind of freebies and teaser things coming the way of my newsletter people. That didn't make any sense.
That's, you know what? And I somehow understood it, and I love it, and I cannot wait to sign up for your newsletter.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this has been delightful. This has been the best part of my day. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh my gosh, yes. And you're just so delightful to talk to, and you have a great laugh, and I adore your accent. So, Helen, thank you so much for being here with us today. You are just a gem.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.